The parents intervening, like when you know what you're doing and they kind of don't.
I had, I think, 27 juniors compete in the Washington State Junior Championship.
So if you haven't done it, I don't really think you can speak to it.
If I see a guy with his putter and it's finishing at waist high, that's a guy I want to play for money.
Hello, everyone. It's time for another adventure in Don't Get Me Started. A little conversation with a new good friend of mine, Jack Kelly, who's the director of instruction at Glendale Country Club in Bellevue, Washington. That's around Seattle, for those of you that don't know the Northwest. Jack's been recognized by Golf Digest as one of the best young teachers in America. I think it's still America. Don't worry, I won't get into politics now. And in the state of Washington. Not D.C., Washington State. And many of you may have seen some of Jack's material on his Instagram page, at Real Jack Kelly. So it's got a large following. Jack, thanks for joining today. We've got a few points to hit on, and then of course this could go pretty much anywhere, as it always does. So I'm going to get started with that. Anything else? I think this is always you'd like to share with the listeners and viewers about yourself and your background before we get into some questions?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christopher. I'm excited to chat with you and get into some things. Yeah, first of all, I'm a student of the game. I started just like anyone else playing the game, outside golf course, a public golf course in North Bend, Washington State, and fell in love with the game playing and played in college. Tried my hand at the real world, the tech world, and just missed golf. And so got back into it, and then just really found my passion for teaching and sharing the game. So I'm lucky to be able to do that full-time teacher these last 5 years or so. And I just love learning. It's just a lifelong pursuit, right? As you know. So that's just what gets me going, is like trying to get closer to the answer, which I'll never find, but it's just fascinating for me and I love it. And so it's just so fun to share that with others. So that's kind of where I'm at, and excited to keep going.
Yeah, right on. I mean, I think obviously it's a lifelong endeavor in search of some answers, like you say, to help our students. So you do a lot with juniors, and you have done, and you continue to do. Can you just share with the audience a little bit about what you do and why you do it and how you do it and what you've seen, with the little ones? That'd be a good place to start.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've a few years ago, someone was like, "Oh, Jack Kelly, you're the junior coach," and it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, I never really thought about it that way, and then I realized, I'm like, yeah, I do, primarily juniors, and I've kind of found my way there. And I think, I think as a PGA professional, we are ambassadors to the game, and I think we are a large part in growing the game and pushing the game forward. And I see I take that as a big responsibility, and I see the best way I can push the game forward and do my small part in this game is just creating more golfers, right? So I work at a private country club, and in a sense, our members, if you're a member at a private club, or if you're hooked on this game, golf has kind of got you. You're a golfer. And so, I really take a big responsibility in trying to create that next wave of golfers. And I think one of my goals is, each year, how many golfers can I create? And that a lot of that is in the junior world. Most juniors, if they're young, let's say 8 to 13 years old, I wouldn't even classify them as golfers, right? They're just kids with time and energy and passion. And can I maybe can I expose them to golf and get them into that? I see as a big responsibility. I still coach, plenty of adults, and I still create golfers and adults, and that gets me going. But I really have a passion for juniors, and then that's really morphed into, I coach of a lot of elite juniors, tournament players, and I really have a passion for that. and just like I see, as I'm 31 right now, I don't feel that far removed from junior golf, and I can think back to some influential people in my life as a junior golfer and realize like how much of a role they played in shaping me as a human, as a man, and I hope that I can be that for someone in their life, whether they're going through some tough times. I think just having a person they can trust, look forward to seeing, I get a lot of fulfillment in my juniors at my club or whatever, seeing me and brightening up and saying, "Hi, Jack, I'm looking forward to seeing me." That keeps me going, whether it's adults too. I think that's just such a cool thing that golf coaches can play. I really, it's cool when people look forward to seeing you. And if I can just be a bright spot in their day, help them out with their golf game, but also just be a friend and a cheerleader. I think that can make a bigger impact beyond just helping them out with their golf game.
Hey, let me run something by you. I find this interesting. So a lot of times, as far as juniors go, we throw them to the new coaches, the people they're just starting to teach, right? And it's like, they don't need expert coaching, so I'm gonna give it. The juniors are gonna go to the people that are just learning how to teach, of which there's a lot, right? And I always find that a little odd because I don't have kids, so I guess I can't speak to this, but of course I will anyway. Like, I would want my kids when they go to kindergarten or nursery school or Montessori school or first grade or whatever to have the absolute best teachers when they're young, the best guides and the best teachers, instead of saying, oh, we're going to have so-and-so that do the juniors because they're new to teaching. I think I wouldn't say it's backwards, but I'd rather have the young kids have the best teachers, right, initially to get them going, and then maybe you could pass them off to not a lesser teacher. But you got any thoughts on that and why it works that way?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's funny, they're so it's a big responsibility when they're at that first stage in golf because they're so malleable, right? And so how can we get them started on the right foot with the game, with fundamentals and stuff like that, because these are a lot of habits that they're gonna take with them for a long time. And getting back to how do we push the game forward, how do we create more golfers, those early on, that's a really pivotal point. I've changed my junior programming at my club to less technique work early on, and how can we just get them having fun and want to, like, my goal is like, how can I get them to want to come back to Glendale next week, 100%. And so it's we play games. One of my favorite things is like, we do random things. We'll play wiffle ball and we'll play tag and stuff, and like, I love when they're like, isn't this golf? Why is there a soccer ball here? And I'm like, whatever, let's have fun. Let's play flyers up, so. Plus,
excuse me, that's a lot of times it's the parents that are like, what is this? They're rolling down a hill or they're kicking a soccer ball or throwing something. And they're like, what does this have to do with golf? And that's a whole other topic. Like the parents, sorry for interrupting there. The parents intervening, like when you know what you're doing and they kind of don't. And they're like, what does this have to do with golf? And in reality is, it has everything to do with it because you're just trying to create some athletes at first.
I used to care what the parents thought about in my junior stuff. Now I don't really care. If the kids have a big smile on their face and they want to come back to golf next week, man, I don't care at all. And this is like, in the junior programming where we're just trying to create the golfer, I do my private lessons with the elite juniors. That's another thing. And if they want and we're going to get down in the nitty gritty, I have opportunities for that too.
Yeah, the parents are a challenge. All right, let's skip around a little bit. Last time we chatted in preparing for this, and I'm a big fan of this because this is what old people like me used to have to do instead of having access to all these people on the interwebs, as I like to call them. Like, you spent a lot of time with Short Game, and then you went and visited some people and spent some time with, and we can. I have no problem naming names whatsoever. If you do, no worries. But it's such a great thing to be able to go in person either take a lesson or watch people teach. So in short games, just shots around the green has become a little bit controversial. There's some folks out there saying, my way or the highway, which happens in a lot of aspects in golf and other. But talk to us a little bit about some of the things you've seen, some of the people you've spent time with maybe recently that some of the viewers and audience might know of, and your thoughts on it.
As some people may be aware of, there's this kind of debate and short game shots around the green, steep versus shallow.
Yeah.
We got to hit 10 down, ball first, and that. And, I spent some time with Joe Mayo and heard him talk in Kentucky this fall. I think, I'm a fan of, when it comes to shots around the green, I'm a fan of moving that club up and down on plane. So pretty neutral. I think the fact is that most human nature, when it comes to, whether it's full swing or shots around the green, everyone likes to take that club inside and under plane. Way shallow. So instead of taking that club more upward, they're taking it around their body. Like, I use the term, we got merry-go-round and we got Ferris wheel. Most golfers, and no blame on golfers at all, because literally 95% or more get that club inside early and under plane. So, Joe's talk about trying to get that VSP, vertical swing plane, more upright, I think is totally on track, because most everyone is inside and under plane. So I give short lessons every day, every week. It's very rare where I'm like, okay, you're too steep, you're too up and down. Yeah. We need to get you shallower. So in that, I think, pretty much everyone needs to get that club more up and more vertical. So I think that's true, and that's what I'm doing on a daily basis, is trying to get that club more up and on plane. Yeah. Now does I don't know that it needs to be I find I help golfers when I can just get them on plane and not necessarily 10 down making divots. I still believe in, it seems like using the bounce is no good anymore, or some people think that's no good anymore. I like when there's a long flat spot at the bottom that they can land that club, and they can hit a little bit behind it, brush and glide along the turf, and have that ball come out. I feel very strongly there's this, everyone wants to hit this low spinner. And, I think, I don't know that that's necessarily, like, why can't we just hit something a little bit higher with a little more spin? Yeah. I think I'm after softness around the greens. And I think this, I think the low spinner, it takes a few bounces for it to check up and come to rest. I'm a fan of hitting the ball a little bit higher with maybe not the visible grab. I think that's a tough shot for a lot of golfers to replicate. And so, why can't we hit something that's I'm after softness, which is a combination of height and land angle and some spin, rather than trying to hit this golf ball first every time. I'm, as I said, I'm a student of the game. I'm always watching, YouTube videos and listening to the pros. They hit the ground first a lot of the time.
100%.
I feel like possibly the majority of the time they're hitting the ground first. And to me, I think some of the softest golf shots around the green come when we're hitting grass first, not the golf ball.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can help a lot of people with, getting on plane with the club face not shut. Everyone takes it back super shut. They try and keep that club face pointed at the ball. Yeah. Because they think square face. I gotta have this square face. Yeah. And if we start to get that toe rotating a little bit more upward, just keeping the loft on the club, that club can slide and glide. You know, I think there's times when we do want to hit ball first, and I think good short gamers kind of have it all. They can hit ball first, but then also, you know, if they have to hit something a little bit high, I think a lot of them are hitting some grass first and letting the bounce engage.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to put everyone into, you know, a box in one way. But I know I help people every day just getting that club more on plane, not steep, not shallow. And I'm, you know, I go to tour events, I film golfers, you know, the best in the world, and I look, what are their commonalities? Where is that club head when it's parallel to the ground? And they aren't all super steep and hitting that golf ball first, you know. They're not super shallow. That club head isn't way inside like it is for most amateurs. They're pretty damn on plane.
I love to say the proof's in the pudding. Like, if somebody says, well, this is the way to do it, okay, so what are the best in the world doing? And are they all doing the same thing? To your point, it really depends on the shot. I think for newer players, it's probably good to at least have a go-to thing. If you're really bad, maybe there's something you go to, and then you broaden your horizons, and you get a little bit more variety in it. So, and you study it and you watch it. Give me your. This is unprepared, which is what this is all about. Give me your top 5 in the world right now. Short gamers, I love it. Whether you want to call it, you know, chipping, pitching, lobbing, blah blah blah. Let's keep putting out of it just for now. Who's the best? Top 5 right now.
I love Justin Thomas. I have a lot of video that I took of him. He's just very neutral, very textbook. You know, a great model. Jordan Spieth, you know, does it a little bit differently. And the conditions he grew up on, you know, contribute to how he plays it.
For sure.
I like Jason Day a lot. I have video for him. A comment on that too about short game is, you know, there's this idea that you want to take the risks complete. Like, Jason Day is known as the guy that doesn't use any risks. He uses his chest, you know, no risks at all. And I have an issue with the no risks at all. You know, if you set up to that golf ball, and if we go no wrist, if you lock out your wrists and you just turn your chest, that club is so damn underplaying and inside. There's got to be something to get that club a little more up. And that is one thing that Joe Mayo talks about that I like, is to get that club a little more up. You know, he talks about there's that lead shoulder going a little bit down as you take that away, which gets that club a little more upward, and you don't have to use as much wrist to get it upward. But that's just something, you know, I think a lot of people build this narrative that they can't trust their hands in golf. And they can't. And I had this conversation with someone about this yesterday afternoon, you know, who's trying to take the hands out of his golf game. And everyone is using their hands. You know, that's a bad narrative to start playing in your head, that you can't trust your hands, or that you can't use your hands. You know, every golf shot you're using your hands, and you know, I believe in training and educating your hands. While you know, I like to frame it like this. You know, in short game, while the chest is the star of the show, your hands and wrists are a supporting actor, and both are needed for this great motion picture. Now, it's still the chest dominating the stroke, but you know, it's okay to use your hands in golf. That's our, I mean.
Yeah, we hear that with putting as well. Yeah, and I remember talking to my good friend David Orr, who knows about as much about putting as pretty much anybody on the planet, from his experience and his 3D motion capture that he's done with Dr. Rob Neal. And I've had people ask him, like, for putting, like, you know, hey, no wrists, no hands. And David says, do you really want to know what your wrists are doing when you putt? You may not want to know. because even when you look at a putting stroke that looks like, oh, it's shoulder driven or whatever you want to call it, he's like, you have no idea what your wrists are doing. They're moving all over the place. So back to like you said, like a Jason Day, or maybe all time, especially with a wedge, would be a guy like Stricker. And you say, well, there's no wrists there. There is. It's just less. There's just less than what you see. And then again, we always have to be careful. I've learned so much from my good friend Jim McLean, who's a native Seattle guy as well. It's like you got to be really careful about believing what a tour player says they're doing and thinks they're doing. Go shoot video, look at it, and it may not be exactly what they think or believe. So, I like the way you explain that. And back to the short game, then I want to jump to some putting stuff. I always ask myself, like, okay, whether it's Joe Mayer or somebody else who's preaching this and that, like, I'm a bit of a mini historian. Like, I think about who are the greatest short game players of all time, and what would they say? Like if Seve went to see who I think is one of my top 5 all time, Seve Ballesteros. Like if Seve went to Mayo, like what would Seve think? Would he just stand there and nod his head? Would he be like, yeah, I can do that, and I got 50 other shots? So, to your point, what does the individual need, right, to get better?
And if you look at that, the most famous chip possibly of all time, Seve in that Open Championship, I forgot where it was at.
Oh yeah, when he bumps it up.
Yeah, that club works right up the shaft plane.
Yeah.
That toe points right at the sky.
Yeah.
There's a lot of commonalities of when it's halfway back, that toe's pointed at the sky. There's a lot of commonalities between the best in the world, and that's my basis for my coaching is, and there's a range, right? I filmed, I was showing someone the other day a video of Patrick Cantlay that I filmed, and it was a little bit inside. It was not steep. It was behind the hands, halfway back and coming down. But for a different shot, you might play that a little bit differently. So, there's kind of a range, they need to be in, but they are using their hands a little bit.
Well, their hands are on the club. I've used this video in the past when it comes to arms and hands. There is a great black and white video of a guy, the armless golfer in Scotland, who lost both of his arms I believe it was an accident with a train or something, right? So he literally he held the club here between his neck and his shoulder. Tommy McAuliffe is his name. It's a pretty cool thing. It's inspirational. And the dude could break 100, but first of all, he didn't hit it anywhere because he didn't have arms and hands. So yeah, just to clarify, for sure that helps people. Let's jump a little bit to putting since I just kind of brought it up, and some of your thoughts on, and here's another very controversial topic to some extent, or I should say confusing. People come to us and they're confused. And even back to this, hey, can I use my wrists and my hands, or does it need to be the shoulder motion? Again, David Orr has done a lot of work with that. I'm going to give a little quick shout out to Bruce Rarick, who I've spent quite a bit of time with in the last 9 months or so, who has an abundance of data and information and experience. And then, to the person that I was fortunate to spend some time with back, and he just passed last year at the ripe young age of 101, who was Jackie Burke Jr., who always told people this: the best way to putt is the way you putt best. And that kind of stops people in their tracks. Like, wait a minute, you need to tell me how to do it. And, there is a best way for you to putt and me to putt and whoever to putt. But what are some of the things that you like or you see? There was something RE acceleration, and that people get testy about that. Help us out there a little bit with what you like or see.
Yeah, so just through my own coaching and again looking at what are the best players doing, I'd say 5 years ago or so I started noticing a big difference between high-level pro players and the average amateur and the average golfer in terms of where their follow-through finished on the putting green. On the average, club putting green, everyone's got this really long follow-through. And
100%.
and there's no one on tour that follows through that far.
Yep.
And so I started noticing this, and I noticed the difference. Most amateurs and most golfers take it very short back and very, very far through. And there's this big discrepancy in their backstroke versus their forward stroke.
Yep.
Compared to tour players that are more equal in terms of backstroke versus forward stroke.
Yep.
I started to notice, okay, there's some that actually take it farther back than through.
Yep.
There's some that take it a little bit farther through than as far they go back, but overall they're pretty equal.
Agreed.
But human nature, and I think we're battling some with human nature as far as like, I see new golfers will take a short back and really far through, but then I also think there's this narrative and this feeling that I gotta be accelerating that putter through impact. And it's like every putt missed or every putt left short. The cop out, everyone's like, oh, I decelerated. It's like every bad shot in golf people conceptualize as deceleration.
Yep.
Literally no one decelerates the putter. Everyone is over accelerating. It's very, very rare where someone is actually slowing down that putter into it.
Unless you chunk it, which we've all done. And then people say, oh, it decelerated. Well, it did because the planet Earth got in the way of your swinging putter head.
Right, but most everyone is rapidly. It's really just a late acceleration, rapidly changing. They take it really slow and short back. And David Orr, I'm a Flat Stick member, and I've.
Oh yeah, cool.
So he, he talks about this. If you take it back, slow and short, there's not enough energy created, and the golfer has to late accelerate through the golf ball.
Physics 101, 100%, yeah.
And the way I, kind of phrase this is like, if your putter is your tool that you're using to, quote, control your speed. We've talked about this before. Control is a loaded word. We're trying
100%.
to, you're trying to manage your speed. But if you're trying to manage your speed, why do we want this tool, your putter, to be rapidly changing speeds? If there's a speedometer on your putter, why do we want this thing speeding, like rapidly changing speeds at the very moment that you're trying to, quote, control your speed?
Yeah.
Would we be better off building some more energy up in that backstroke through a little speed and length to that backstroke? So now that this putter, when it's moving into the ball, is moving at a bit more of a constant rate.
Yeah.
I used to call it, or I still do. You have acceleration and you have deceleration, and can we get this putter accelerating through the ball? So not, basically coasting through.
Love it.
And I think the most remarkable thing for me is that there's a completely different contact and roll when that putter is not accelerating and changing speeds quite so much into and through that golf ball. So I think the big and I've spent some time with some putting people that actually believe that possibly the best roll is coming off a putter that's actually slightly decelerating into the golf ball, and we'll see in the next 5 or 10 years how that plays out as this gets measured more. But I've seen with my own eyes, if we can take out that hit at the ball and we can start stroking putts, letting that ball get in the way, the roll is a lot better. Start lines are a lot better. And I think really what I'm trying to say, and I think the big distinction is that we want to try and manage our speed through stroke length rather than how hard and soft. So if a golfer starts to work on this, they need to change. I think currently the golfer, when they get to their putt, they're like, okay, how hard do I have to hit this? hard and hit imply
for sure.
acceleration hitting that golf ball. And what I'm trying to get with my players is, when we arrive to a putt and we're designing the putt, I want them to think, okay, how big of a stroke do I need? And that's really what we're after, is how can we make it more of a stroke length? How far back do I need to take this? And that gets into kind of the speed of the putter. But, how big of a stroke do I need for this putt, rather than how hard do I need to hit this putt, so they're not hitting at it. So I think I don't understand why more people aren't on this trend, if you will, and why this isn't talked about more often. But I joke that the higher the finish, the higher the handicap. And if I see a guy, and I see it every day, if I see a guy with his putter and it's finishing at waist high, that's a guy I want to play for money. And if I see them finishing lower, they're going to shoot some lower scores. So it's just building up some more energy in that backstroke, so that putter is not rapidly changing speeds at the very moment we're trying to manage our speed.
Yeah, there's a lot of cause and effect there.
And there's, to be honest, like there are, again, I'm watching what the best are doing. There's still some that are accelerating that putter into the golf ball. There's still some acceleration amongst the best, but I think it's less acceleration than people have in their mind of what they need. And when you miss a putt short, it's not because you decelerated, it's because that backstroke was just far too short. People take the same length of backstroke that they do for a 6-footer as they do for a 35-footer. And they try and change how fast they're moving the putter forward and through the ball versus changing. We need different backstroke lengths for different lengths of putts.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, again, look at the best. They all do it slightly differently, but they do have some commonalities, and it's somewhere between a constant cruise control speed and slightly accelerated to manage the speed that the ball goes. And that's a big deal for most amateurs, is when they're out there 3-putting whatever, they're probably not very good green readers and they can't manage their speed, and then they take a lot of putts. So while we still have some time, since apparently sometimes I'm long-winded, talk to me, this is kind of what spurred me to start talking to some people. There's some things that I question that's going on right now with golf instruction everywhere. You might say it pisses me off, because you're looking at a guy who's been in the trenches for 35 years, and I see people really wanting to get better, and then some of the avenues that they're taking, not necessarily helping them. We're a little different generations. Like, what do you see? What's an issue for you? I always ask people, make your issue your asset to some extent. Like, so what are some of the things you see in golf instruction circa 2025 that you're questioning or you're not happy with, and then what are you going to do about it?
When it comes to a lot of golf instruction, online or tips, the average golfer, it's often we need to kind of dumb it down and make it simpler and get the concepts right. Like, I think sometimes we get into too high level stuff, and I think maybe you had a quote about like the river is easiest to cross at its source. Was that you with that quote?
I didn't come up with that. I just beg, borrow, and steal from everybody.
Right, but I remember you saying that in a talk, and it's like like, for instance, I gave a ladies clinic just a couple days ago, and like the main concept that I wanted them to leave with is that we need to hit, it's the concept of low point, and we need to first of all, we need to touch the ground with our club in order to make that golf ball fly at the trajectory that we want. And we need to be trying to hit that golf ball first and then brushing that ground after. And so that, that might seem like a very elementary, concept to talk about. That's not known amongst a lot of golfers. And there's a misconception there. And in just some of these most simple, basic things that are required for a good golf shot, that I think, sometimes it's missing when you're just, there's not many YouTube videos on that or Instagram reels on just some of those most simple things. And so I think sometimes if the golfer has a poor concept at the beginning, it almost doesn't matter what's going on in their backswing and how their wrist angles are if they don't have some of these basics down. So I think some of that is missed when it comes to, these to golf instruction. Just all these kind of simple basic stuff, how to play the game. Really, and that's what I've learned as I coach more, is like there's all these small things that aren't talked about enough, and it's
or misunderstood, right? Misconceptions, poor concepts, stuff that's, again, this doesn't become a pissing match like opinions or this or that, but there's some stuff that's based in physics or and that's been passed on like through generations, and people are still holding it. And then, as I like to say, it's not serving you. Is it helping you? Yeah. And I've been around a little bit longer than you have, and I see people all the time that do just amazing things that actually work for them, right? As soon as I think I've got it all figured out, somebody shows up on my lesson tee and they do it, all wrong, and it's brilliant, which it keeps us going, right? It makes us, think out of the box a little bit, or get rid of the box, or think critically.
Yeah, I think, we've talked about, we're both in the trenches. We are, I'm in the bunker with, a 72-year-old woman.
Yeah.
And we're trying to just get that golf ball out of the bunker. Are you going to tell, I think most golf instructors, and maybe me 8 years ago, would have been like, now, okay, Helen, we got to stack our weight left, and we got to open this club face, and, and you got to stay left. And some of this can only be figured out after you give enough of these poor golf lessons where you're like, well, darn, I don't know that that's really going to work or serving this person. So Helen, what about, can you just show me a swing that you make with your 9-iron from the fairway? And she's like, in the bunker? I'm like, yeah, just show me that and show me your finish. And she kind of makes a big backswing and follows through. And I'm like, what if we just, grab your wedge, and what if we make that swing and maybe we open the club face a little bit, but what if we just make your normal golf swing and you try and hit the sand, a ball behind the ball, and we don't do all the things maybe you're supposed to do about digging your feet in and getting wide and getting forward. Just some of the typical things that maybe aren't wrong, or maybe some of the best players are doing that aren't going to work for the average golfer. And I think just I see tips and stuff online, and I'm like, well, that might not be wrong. If you tell that to an average golfer on the lesson tee, they can't do that, or they're going to give up too quickly. That's too much. Are they going to put in, when we're in a coaching session, we're trying to figure out, okay, how much time and energy is this person going to put into making this adjustment? And is this worth it? Is this 55-year-old male who's a 12 handicap? Are we really going to change his wrist conditions up at the top? Is he gonna put in the effort, the time and effort to do that?
Yeah.
Maybe some, but not most. So. And he's taking that club way inside and whatever, but it's like, is getting him a little bit more on plane in that takeaway, is that really going to make a big difference to his ball flight and help him play better in men's opening day next week? I don't know. I'm not going to touch it. And when he asked me, should that club be there? I'm like, most pros, it's not there, but we're all right. Did you see that high draw you just hit? So I think it's figuring out what the golfer can really digest and do, and are they gonna stick with it? And I think that's the art of coaching is how to adjust for the individual student.
100%, and that's where we get into trouble with, to some extent, and they're still out there, even though a lot of them are hypocrites and say, no, I'm not a method model teacher. and we don't have to name names, but we all know them. And then you look at their material, you look at whether it's online or in person, they tell everybody the same thing. And I think with putting or short game or full swing or even how to play, it's such just a brutal disservice to the human. As Dr. Mark Bull likes to say, we're all case study of one. You are a case study. All our students are. And so the method model people, and they're like, oh, no, that's not me. Really? And then you watch them and they tell everybody the same thing. It's like telling everybody to go to the same church or eat the same diet or do this or that. You're going to destroy a lot of them. You'll help one or two. So I think it's still out there. And for me, it's a cop-out. It's an easy way to coach. Just have everybody do this or have everybody do what Tiger did in 2000 or whatever it is. So, all right, we got a few more minutes. Tell me what are you most proud of right now as a teacher and coach?
The coolest thing for me last year, or what I'm most proud of, is I had, I think, 27 juniors compete in the Washington State Junior Championship. So WJGA State Championship, which is a big deal here in Washington State. I grew up playing in WJGA, we call it, and looking forward to state. And I had 27 of my students playing it last year. So
that's pretty cool.
That felt good, and I had two students win state. So that was really cool for me. Yeah. I have a question for you. Making sure we have time for it.
No. This is not about me. Yeah, go ahead.
So you're the fastest golfer in the world, right?
Ooh, used to be. Old, fat, and broken now. I don't have much hair, but yeah.
Guinness Book of World Records, speed golf champion. Can you tell us? No one likes playing a slow round of golf, and we all run into slow play. How can golfers speed up their rounds, and where are we spending too much time that maybe not only is making for a longer golf round, but where are golfers spending too much time that might actually be hurting their game as well?
Yeah, that's a whole other topic, and in fact, it's what I'm started to present a little bit on. I did something at the Golf Magazine Top 100 in December, basically called Pick Up the Pace to Pick Up Performance, and this is not about getting people into playing speed golf. It's about how most people, if they were a little less deliberate, less conscious, less thinking, they play a little bit better. Not everybody. I mean, again, it depends on the individual, but more time, more processing becomes more conscious. Like I'm much more, could you get your subconscious to take over? So I use this analogy is you can think of your conscious mind as the coach, okay, or teacher, and your subconscious as the team or the player, right? And we got March Madness going on right now. I'm a big John Wooden fan. Anyway, and then I ask people, who plays the game? Right? Well, the player plays, the team plays. That's your subconscious. The coach doesn't play. So what happens to too many of us, I think this happens with teachers and coaches like us, when we go to play, we're still in the coach mode or the conscious mode.
Boy, do I know. Yeah.
And when we go to play, the team plays. Okay, that's your subconscious. It has all the skills. It's brilliant. As I share, just some basic neuro stuff, is the brain processes this is not my opinion, this is scientific fact, it processes about 11 million bits of information per second. All right? That is a lot. And they've actually measured this by looking at the sense organs and the receptor cells that fire to the brain, right? And 10 million of those are visual. Right? So that is a freaking lot of information coming in all the time. But we only process about 40 of the 11 million per second. So the rest of it goes into what's called the adaptive unconscious or the subconscious. So it's all in there. Otherwise, why would we have a system that takes in so much information? So again, I think it's easier for people that have played more, but that's a lot of info. And so where we really see I think what's brutal is people get on the green, they really slow down, and don't get me wrong, reading the green is super important, but I think your system, when I say system, mind, body, brain, is doing a lot of this work, right, behind the scenes. And so in general, if most people took a little less time, they're going to see, better performance. And I'll have people do exercises where, hey, let me see your regular pre-shot routine. Okay, walk in, they do this and that. Okay, now let's speed it up just a little bit. I've had people that literally just walk in with their eyes on the target, set up and go, and they hit it better than, back to what you said earlier, all the supposed to and the shoulds. Right? And I like to tell people, stop shooting on yourself. So my speed golf story, the first time I played with my good friend Tim Scott at Broadmoor in Portland, we went out and I got done. I was like, holy shit. All my paradigms got blown up. Everything I thought you had to do to play good golf got thrown under the bus, right? So no practice swings, no exact yardages, no taking freaking 5 to 10 minutes reading the greens. And I played really well with a half a tool set. So that really, whoa, like what just happened? And then I reached out like you do to better understand it. So I went out, and these people are like my go-to folks now, neuroscientists, performance experts, and specialists in motor learning. I was like, why in the world did this work so well? This is all wrong. You're not supposed to do this when you play golf. You're supposed to do this and that. And it turns out that the system works a lot better in using those kind of notions. And so, does that mean, I don't know, sometimes I go play golf with people and they know I'm the speed golf guy and they play way too fast and they play worse. But in general, less is more. And like where I really see it, and it's just, I know the coaches in college golf can help the players, right? And so it's already kind of slow. The player's trying to get yardage or read the green. Then the coach comes out and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I think a fun thing to do, I do speed putting where you just have people basically look and go. Most people are shocked how well they do. And all the people in my, 30 years of playing speed golf now, and I don't do it too much. I only do it for a good reason. My body's a little beat up, but I've had journalists and media and say, hey, we want to come out and do a story or whatever. And I said, I'm a firm believer. Nothing has been learned until it's been experienced. So if you haven't done it, I don't really think you can speak to it. So I usually say to them, it's like, all right, let's go. We're going to play one hole. The person's like, I don't even run. I can't even run. Fine, we're going to walk fast. Or we'll play 3 holes. And most of my experiences, people do that and they're hooked. They're like, wow, I can't believe it worked that well. Because it's contrarian to what we, kind of believe that we're supposed to do. So I think, again, explore it with people. Find an optimal time as well for them, like when they walk in the ball, like number of seconds. I don't know what and here we get into trouble with, the average PGA Tour player from the time they pull the club to the time they hit the ball is X. That's great. But if you look at the greatest performers in anything, none of them are average, right? So average is great, but you're not average, I'm not average. All our students are not average, even if they suck, even if they're awful. So we have to find the best way for them to hold the golf club, stand, swing, and play. And from a timing aspect, maybe it's a little bit, quicker, maybe not. Everybody's kind of wired differently. So I've just tried to take everything I've learned from speed golf and specifically those learnings and how I can apply it to, traditional or what I call slow golf now. And then from the really smart people that I've, interacted with that have been able to explain, like I'm always kind of curious, like, why does this work this way? And then, again, share that with people that are trying to get better.
I think a key point you made there that is huge is like, really looking and locking in on the target. And I think, when the average golfer is so concerned and focused on the golf ball and what's going on back here in the backswing and everything back here instead of in front of them and the target. I mean, if you look at good golfers, their eyes and their intent and their focus is more up at where they want the ball to go, where the average golfer is focused on where the ball currently is and 100%. and all this business, back here, especially on the greens. I see, if you're not going to take a practice stroke, you better be really looking and visualizing and locking in, basically hitting the putt in your mind before you strike that golf ball, of the energy needed and what you need for that putt. But, you know, when it comes to putting, people make their practice strokes and they're not even looking at the hole, or they're not engaging with that target. I feel very strongly about just target engagement. And there's, you know, I think you know, people way smarter than me say that, you know, it takes the average person 2 to 3 seconds of looking at that target to really consciously gauge how far it is away and really resonate with it. Where I see, like, you know, the average golfer is looking at the golf ball on here, and then they just like, maybe they glance up at the target really quickly, and there isn't that process of really engaging with that target. So I think, you know, it sounds like that's a, you know, if you're not going to take practice strokes, and if you're just playing the game, you know, speed golf, you know, it's all in front of you, and where do we want that ball to go? I think that's something that the average golfer can really improve on.
It is. Like I always told people, I think speed golf, other than the physical demands, it's a lot easier way to play. Like, let's jump into the sports psychology for a minute. Like, you know, if you hit a bad shot in speed golf, like, you know, you pick up, you go, like, your next shot is only seconds away. And we all know, like, the longest walk in golf is after you hit a crappy one, and then you got to, you know, wait, and then you got to stew on it for another 10 minutes or whatever. That just, it doesn't work very well. So with speed golf, like, okay, I hit a bad one, now I got to go, and the next one's, you know, going to be right in front of me. That's something that, you know, it's another aspect that can certainly help. Shout out to, you know, one of my go-to people is Dr. Debbie Cruz, who I feel is probably the best, one, if not the best, kind of mental mindset coach out there. And she's helped me with so much of many of these ideas. Last year I got stuck. I mean, here I am. I've played golf for 1,000 years now. And I was, as you probably do, I was tinkering around. I'm always trying to make something better, this and that. I got so tied up. I had to go play in something, like for real, like for keeps. And she was like, all right, just go out on the golf course, walk into the ball, take one look and swing. She's like, you know how to do it. Your subconscious knows how to do it, right? That's the team, right? That's what plays. And it was like remarkable. It was like I'd never played golf before. I just went out, I looked and swang. Victor Hovland had a really interesting quote. I love that guy. He's so honest. You know, it's like, here's one of the best players in the world, and he has the same demons and the same doubts and the same, like, oh, I don't want to play because I'm hitting it crappy, as all of us. So when right after he won on Sunday, he said something to this extent. I'll paraphrase. He said, I made some disgusting swings, but the ball went where I was looking. And I just immediately thought, that's your team. That's your subconscious, that if you put in there what you want, back to your target awareness piece, like, I want it to go there, this thing will kind of figure it out, especially if you have any kind of aptitude or skill in swinging a golf club. I think it's a little more challenging for people that are new, you know. But for those of us that have played, like, if you just put out there what you want and what your intention is, like, it sounds too simple, like you got this unbelievable complex system. But if your last impulse is fairway, green, hole, if you're putting, and you give that intention to this system, it will figure it out. And if you stay out of its way. And again, that's where I tell people too, so the coach or the conscious mind is super helpful in preparing things. Like, you find your golf ball, you get to it, you look at the lie, you do your maths, you know, what's going on, boom. And then the coach needs to go sit down. And I'll go back to Coach Wooden, who I never met. My good friend Jim McLean did, spent time with him. But I saw Coach Wooden coach here in Eugene when they played the Ducks. And he would literally sit there. Everything was prepared. He'd sit there with his rolled up program. Turns out he held something else in his other hand. And he just sat there and watched. I mean, he substituted in and out, but it was like, so, you know, he'd program and planned ahead his players to do kind of what they wanted to do. So, yeah, learned a lot from it, still learning from it, like we all are. All right, so we're gonna end this great conversation shortly, Jack. But if you could go take a lesson from past or present, dead or alive, anyone that's been around this game or something else? By the way, I just thought of this question. This was not pre-planned. Like, who would you? It's like that question people say, "Hey, if you could have your dream foursome or whatever, you know." Mine's way bigger than four, and it's mostly these weird, like, mystical philosopher people. But if you could go, and this is still so valuable for everybody listening, go take a lesson from someone, maybe somebody you don't agree with, and then ask if you can stick around for the day and watch them teach, and then download with them. So, to you, if you could go see anybody, and maybe they are alive, who would you go see, and why?
Oh man, that's really good. That's tough. You know, I think I'd like to go see and spend some time with Jack Nicklaus.
Ah, there you go.
You know, the strongest competitor, and you know, his technique is probably something no one's really teaching and copying. I don't know why, but he's the greatest major champion of all time. He's the greatest champion of all time. I think he would have a lot of nuggets into how to play the game, how to prepare. You know, I think that'd probably be just a wonderful day, and I glean a lot from that.
Think about this. Arguably the greatest clutch putter ever. No one has copied his style. Everybody likes to copy whoever, swing, whatever. Like, why isn't anybody copying that? So, great point. All right, amigo. Thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you live soon. I'll be back in the in these parts in June. Maybe we'll cross paths live. Appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. Continue to rock and roll. And yeah, I just appreciate your insight, my friend.
Thank you, Christopher. I enjoyed it. I appreciate it. Thanks, anyone, for watching. Hopefully you learned a few things, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Hope everyone has a great golf season and years ahead.
Rock on. Thanks.